The worst things in a suburb don't happen at night. They happen in that dead hour before dawn when the streetlights still glow, when every house is dark except one, and when the only person awake enough to see it is the one delivering the paper. These 11 accounts came in from carriers and couriers who walked the same quiet streets for years, until the morning they saw something they were never supposed to see: the house with no curtains. This first story came from a 16-year-old paperboy working a route outside Bozeman, Montana. He delivered the Chronicle 7 days a week, rain or snow. And every morning at exactly 3:35 a.m., he passed a house that made the hair on his arms stand up. I started the route in October, right when the mornings got dark enough to need a headlamp. My parents thought it built character. I thought it built the savings for a dirt bike. The route had 42 houses, all of them quiet that hour, except 1407, Elk Grove Lane. It was a split level like all the others, bay siding, a 2-car garage, and a picture window facing the street. The window had no curtains, no blinds, no film, just bare glass. The room behind it was lit by a single lamp with an amber shade, and every single morning, a man stood in the center of that light. He never moved. He wore a button-down shirt, untucked, and his arms hung at his sides. He faced the street. The first time I saw him, I figured he was an insomniac watching the sunrise. But the sun didn't rise for another 3 hours. After a week, I noticed his position never changed. Same spot, same posture, same dead stare through the glass. I tried waving once. Nothing. I told myself he was a mannequin, a weird decoration. It was the only explanation that let me keep riding past. One Tuesday morning in mid-November, the temperature had dropped enough that my fingers went numb inside my gloves. I tossed the paper toward the porch of 1407 and glanced at the window out of habit. The man was there, but his head had turned. He was facing me, not the street, not the lawn, me. His eyes tracked my bike as I rolled past. I nearly swerved into gutter. I looked back, and his head had turned further, rotated to follow me down the block. I pedaled so hard my chain rattled. I didn't finish the route that morning. I told my dad the bike broke down. The next day, I made him drive me past before dawn. The house was dark. No lamp, no man. The window wasn't even bare anymore. Someone had hung heavy drapes. I don't know who lived there. I don't want to know. But I still think about that empty window and the way his neck must have cracked when it turned. This account came from a USPS carrier working a rural route in western Pennsylvania. He'd been on the job 11 years and knew every house, every dog, and every resident by name, except one. Route 14 runs through a pocket of Allegheny County where the houses sit far apart and the trees lean over the road. Most days the only sound is gravel under your tires. At mile marker 6, you turn onto a private lane that leads to a farmhouse set back maybe a quarter mile. The name on the box was Camper. The campers got a lot of packages, usually medical supplies, judging by the return labels. I'd leave them on the porch between the rocking chairs. Never saw a soul. The curtains were always drawn. I figured an elderly couple, keeping to themselves. Then the same package sat there for 3 weeks. A medium flat rate box, no visible wear. I checked the date label. It had been scanned on the 20th. By the 10th of the next month, it hadn't moved. No mail was being picked up from a box either. I started feeling uneasy. I knocked on the door. No answer. The next Tuesday, a pickup truck was parked in the driveway when I arrived. An older man in a flannel jacket stepped out as I pulled up. He looked tired. "Hey," he said, "you leave a package here? About you big." I told him yes. 3 weeks ago, right on the porch. He shook his head, said he'd been staying with his daughter in Ohio while his wife was in hospice. He came back to check on the house that morning. The package wasn't there. I walked up to the porch with him. The spot between the rocking chairs was empty. No tape residue, no sign of weather damage, just clean wood. He unlocked the front door and we stepped inside. The house smelled like old coffee and dust. Everything was tidy, but on the kitchen table, the box was sitting opened. Inside was a stuffed bear, the kind they give to patients in hospital gift shops, and underneath it, a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. It read, I waited for you." The old man went pale. He said his wife had died the week before. In Ohio, no one had been in the house. The doors were locked. The windows were locked. The only key was in his pocket. I finished my route that day, but I couldn't stop looking in my rearview mirror. I still drive that lane. The mailbox is gone now. The house is empty. But sometimes when I pass the turnoff, I swear I see fresh tire tracks in the mud, leading in, not out. The man who walked his dog at 4 a.m., a newspaper delivery woman from suburban Madison, Wisconsin, sent in this short account. She covered development of cul-de-sacs and had the route for 3 years before anything stood out. I drove a beat-up Civic with the passenger window permanently rolled down so I could toss papers onto driveways. The development had maybe 60 houses, all built within the last decade, all identical. At that hour, the only other person awake was a man who walked his dog. He was older, 60s maybe, always in a dark windbreaker. The dog was a big shepherd mix with a limp. They walked counterclockwise around the main loop every morning. Right around the time I hit the third cul-de-sac, we never spoke. Just a nod of two people who shared the 4 a.m. silence. One Wednesday in February, the temperature was around 10 degrees and the sidewalks were iced over. I spotted the man at the far end of the loop as usual, but the dog wasn't on a leash. It was walking ahead of him, about 10 feet, and the man was following. Then I saw the strap. The leash was dragging behind the dog, but the handle loop wasn't empty. Something was caught in it, something heavy. The dog strained forward, and the object scraped along the pavement, a dark, lumpy shape I couldn't identify. I slowed the car. The man didn't look at me. His face was blank, eyes forward, jaw slack. He just followed the dog. The shape behind the dog bumped over a curb, and I caught the glint of a zipper pull reflecting my headlights. It was a duffel bag, a full duffel bag, and it left a dark streak on the concrete. I didn't stop. I didn't call out. Something in my gut told me to drive. I finished the route with my doors locked. I never saw that man again. I told myself the bag was full of laundry. Maybe he was taking it to a donation bin. But donation bins don't exist in that development. And laundry doesn't leave wet streaks on frozen cement. I quit the paper route 2 weeks later. Not because of the man, because of what happened the morning after I saw him. The dog was back, walking the loop alone, leash dragging, bag gone, no man anywhere. This one was submitted by a then 15-year-old boy delivering papers in Fort Collins, Colorado. His route covered a neighborhood of older homes with deep yards and overgrown hedges. One house in particular sat lower than the street, its basement window level with the lawn. I got the route through a friend who moved away. His only advice was, "Don't stop at the blue house on Cottonwood." I figured he was messing with me. Cottonwood Drive had a blue house at the dead end, a faded Victorian with peeling paint and a lawn that hadn't been mowed in months. The paper slot was on the front door, which meant I had to walk up a crack path and cross a porch where the boards sagged under my weight. The basement window was at ground level to the right of the porch steps. It was one of those old hopper windows, set into a concrete well. The glass was filthy. The first few weeks, I didn't think much of it. Then I noticed a light. It flickered, low and orange, like a candle or a weak bulb. It came on around the same time every morning, 4:15, and I could see it through the grime as I approached the porch. I told myself it was a timer. A lot of people set timers for their lights. Perfectly normal. One morning, the light was brighter than usual. I stepped closer to the edge of the porch and looked down into the well. The glass had been wiped clean from the inside. I could see into the basement, a dirt floor, exposed joists overhead, and a hand pressed flat against the glass. Palm out, fingers spread. I froze. The hand didn't move. I could see the ridges of the knuckles, the dirt under the fingernails. It was a left hand, small, maybe a woman's. Behind it, the candle flickered on a crate. I backed off the porch. The hand stayed pressed there. I threw the paper from the path and ran. I got halfway down the block before I stopped and looked back. The house was dark. The basement window had fog over. No light, no hand. I should have called the police. I didn't. I was 15 and terrified and convinced I'd imagined it, but I started skipping the blue house. I'd mark it delivered and move on. After 2 weeks, a new slip appeared in my route binder. Do not deliver, vacant. I asked the route manager about it. She said the owner had died 6 months ago and the estate was still in probate. No one had lived there since March, but someone had wiped that glass clean from inside. Someone with a small left hand and dirt under the nails. And I still wonder if they're down there, palm against a window, waiting for the paper boy who stopped coming. A USPS letter carrier from Eugene, Oregon, agreed to cover a route in a town 40 miles east while the regular carrier was on medical leave. She had never set foot in that zip code before her first shift. The route was a rural one. Farms and scattered houses, the kind where mailboxes sit at the end of long gravel drives. Most of them had names written on the inside of the box lid. Smith Henderson Kowalski. One box, near the end of a lane called Blackberry Road, had no name. It was stuffed so full that the door wouldn't close. I opened it expecting a vacation hold that had been ignored. What I found were envelopes, dozens of them, all the same size, all white, all hand-addressed. No return address. The recipient's name was Mary Elwood. The postmark date spanned 3 months. None of them had been collected. I bundled them with a rubber band and drove down the lane. The house at the end was a small bungalow with a chimney and a screen porch. A lamp was on in the living room. The screen door was propped open with a brick. I knocked on the main door. No answer. I called up Postal Service. But the house just sat there, silent. Taped to the inside of the screen door frame was a piece of lined paper. It said, "Don't deliver here anymore." I stood there with a bundle in my hand, unsure what to do. The lamp was on. The door was open. Someone was clearly here, or had been recently. I knocked again, harder. The main door swung inward an inch. It hadn't been latched. I should have left. Every instinct said leave. But I pushed the door open and called inside. The living room was neat. A blanket folded on the couch. A mug of tea on the end table, still warm. The lamp had a pull chain that was swinging slightly, like someone just touched it. From the back of the house, I heard a sound, a soft rhythmic thumping, like a dryer with a shoe in it. I stepped toward the hallway. Mary, the thumping stopped. For 3 seconds, the house was completely silent. Then I heard footsteps, bare feet on hardwood, coming toward me fast. I dropped the mail and ran. I didn't look back. I drove to the next stop with my heart hammering. I finished the route, but I never went down Blackberry Road again. I flagged the box as unsafe. The regular carrier never came back from medical leave, and when I asked about it later, my supervisor just said, "That address is no longer on the route." I don't know what happened to Mary Elwood, but someone in that house didn't want the mail delivered. And someone else, someone who ran toward me in the dark, didn't want me to leave. This account was sent by a retired newspaper carrier who delivered the Detroit Free Press for 22 years in a suburb of Ann Arbor, Michigan. He knew his route better than he knew his own yard, except for one house on Covington Lane. Covington was a quiet street with maple trees and sidewalks that were always swept. Every house had its quirks: a broken shutter, a rusty basketball hoop, a car up on blocks. But no 17 was flawless. The grass was emerald green and cut at a perfect diagonal. The hedges were trimmed into spheres. The flower beds were mulched fresh each season. I never saw a single weed. I also never saw a single person. No one mowing. No one collecting the paper from the porch. No lights on at night. No cars in the driveway. The paper I delivered vanished by the time I came back the next morning, but I never saw who took it after 10 years. Curiosity got the better of me. I started paying closer attention. The lawn had no sprinkler system. I checked. No tire tracks from a service truck. The windows were always clean, inside and out. The porch light bulb never burned out. Once, I walked up the door to deliver a special edition that was too thick to the tube. The doorbell chimed somewhere deep in the house, and I heard something I'll never forget, scraping from underneath the porch. A rhythmic, dry scrape by a shovel dragging across packed earth. It stopped the moment the chime ended. I stepped off the porch and walked along the side of the house to the back fence. The gate was padlocked from the inside. Through a gap in the slats, I could see the backyard. It was dirt, just raw, packed earth. No grass, no plants. A perfect circle of bare earth, maybe 20 feet across. At its center, a mound of fresh soil. Next to it, a shovel stood upright, blade buried a few inches deep. I didn't stick around. I walked back to my car with my spine tingling. That afternoon, I called the city assessor's office. I had a friend there. He looked up 17 Covington and told me the house was owned by a trust. The last recorded occupant had died in 1998. No sale, no rental, no occupancy permit filed since. The trust paid the property taxes every year on time from a P.O. box. I kept delivering the paper. I kept watching the grass stay perfect. And every spring, the flower beds bloomed with bulbs I never saw anyone plant. A few years before I retired, the house went up for sale. I stopped by the open house out of morbid curiosity. The realtor told me the backyard had been professionally landscaped just before listing. I walked around back. The dirt circle was gone. Lush sod covered everything. But near the fence, the realtor pointed out a feature she couldn't explain. A concrete slab, maybe 6 feet by 3, with no obvious purpose. She laughed. Maybe it was a dog run. I didn't laugh back, because I knew what that shovel had been doing for 2 decades in the middle of the night. And I knew that whatever was under that slab hadn't been a dog. A mail carrier from a small town in upstate New York submitted this memory from her second year on the job. She worked a sorting facility in addition to delivering, and one night she processed a letter that made her blood run cold. The envelope was yellowed and soft, like it had been sitting in a drawer for decades. No return address. The recipient's name was written in shaky cursive. Mrs. Helen Dunbrow. The street address was illegible, just loops and scratches, as if the writer's hand had trembled violently. The only clear part was the town in zip Orwell 13493. Our town. I asked my supervisor what to do. He glanced at it and told me to check the route book. No Dunbrow listed. I checked the old delivery records in the back room, the ones that predated computers. There she was, Helen Dunbrow, 62, Fairweather Road. The last delivery entry was stamped 1977. Fairweather Road didn't exist anymore. It had been renamed after a subdivision went in, but I knew the spot. It was a vacant lot now, overgrown with sumac. A few foundation stones in the original farmhouse were still visible. I drove out there after my shift. The lot was quiet. Crickets, the last of the sunset, bleeding into the tree lean. I walked through the weeds to where the front door would have been. There, tucked between 2 stones, was a stack of mail, dozens of envelopes, all yellowed, all addressed to Helen Dunbrow. They were tied with faded ribbon. The top envelope had no postmark. It was the one I'd processed. And underneath it, a small card in fresh white paper. I opened the card. Inside, in that same shaky cursive, a single sentence: "I'm still here. I left the mail where it was." I told my supervisor the letter had been missorted and should be destroyed. He didn't ask questions. I never drove past that lot again, but I think about Helen Dunbrow every time I see an envelope with shaky handwriting. And I wonder who keeps sending letters to a woman who hasn't had a mailbox in 47 years. This story came from a young man who delivered the Austin American-Statesman in a neighborhood of ranch-style houses in Round Rock, Texas. He'd had the route since he was 13. By the time he was 16, one house had taught him what it meant to be truly afraid of the dark. 1208 Elm Street belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Corrigan. She had a little dog that yapped at the window when I dropped the paper by her door. Sometimes she'd wave from the kitchen. She was up early making coffee. She was one of the few people on my route who treated me like a person. In late October, she stopped waving. The dog stopped barking. The house went dark. I figured she'd gone to stay with family for the holidays. But then the papers started piling up on the porch. By November, there were 7 editions stacked neatly. Someone had been picking them up and stacking them, but never bringing them inside. On the 8th day, the stack was gone. The porch was empty. A single light glowed in an upstairs window. I felt relieved. She was back, but the next morning, the light was in a different window, the one on the far left. The next day, it had moved again to the window above the garage. By the end of the week, the light was in the living room window on the ground floor, and in front of the light, a figure stood motionless. It wasn't Mrs. Corrigan. Mrs. Corrigan was maybe 5 feet tall and hunched. This figure was tall and thin, and it stood so still that I thought it might be a coat rack, except there were no coat racks on the ground floor of 1208 Elm Street. I knew the layout because I'd once helped her carry groceries inside. I started timing my delivery, so I'd pass the house when the sky was starting to lighten. The figure was always there, in whatever window held the lamp, and every morning, the window was one step closer to the front door. It was as if whoever stood there was slowly making their way through the house, room by room, toward the entrance. On December 23rd, the light was in the foyer, the front window. The figure stood inches from a glass. I could see the outline of a long coat, a pale oval where a face should have been. No features, just a blank smudge in the dark. I didn't deliver the paper that day. I called the police instead. They did a wellness check. The house was empty. No sign of forced entry. No Mrs. Corrigan. But in the foyer, facing the window, they found a chair. And on the chair, a coat, one of those long wool coats old men wear to church, draped over back as if someone had just stood up and walked away. Mrs. Corrigan's daughter came to clean out the house in January. She told my mom that her mother had died in October in her sleep in that upstairs bedroom. The dog had gone to a neighbor. The house had been empty for 3 months. But someone moved the light. Someone stacked the papers. Someone sat in that chair and watched me ride past, morning after morning, waiting for something. And the thing I can't shake, the thing I'll never shake, is that I don't know whether they were waiting to be seen or waiting for me to come inside. A USPS rural carrier from Indiana submitted a short but deeply unsettling account. He drove a 2-ton truck on a route that covered 60 miles of back roads. The package was a soft-sided mailer, the kind people use for clothes. It had a printed label, standard postage, nothing remarkable. I tossed in the back of the truck with the rest of the morning's load and started my route. Around mile 20, I heard something over the engine noise, a soft rhythmic sound, like a dog panting. I turned down the radio and listened. It was coming from the cargo area. I pulled over and climbed into the back. The sound had stopped. I checked the cages. Nothing alive, no animals, just boxes and envelopes. I shrugged it off as a trick of the wind. At mile 38, the sound came back, louder this time, wet and heavy. I pulled over again, climbed back, and stood in the dark of the truck with my phone flashlight. The sound was definitely coming from the mailer. I picked it up. It was warm, much warmer than the air around it. I held it to my ear, and it breathed. A slow, deep inhale, a pause, a long exhale that rattled through the paper fibers. I dropped it like it was on fire. The mailer landed on the truck bed with a soft thud. The breathing stopped. I told myself it was a prank, one of those sound chips sewn into a stuffed animal. I'd picked up again, squeezed the contents. It felt like fabric, like folded clothes. I pressed my thumb into the center of the package. Something shifted under the fabric, something that wasn't a shirt, something that gave slightly and then pushed back. I didn't open it. I didn't deliver it. I drove straight back to the distribution center and dropped it on my supervisor's desk. "Run this through the scanner," I said. "Tell me what's inside." He called me the next day. The package had been empty. Just a folded set of baby clothes, he said. No electronics, no sound chips, no hidden mechanisms. But when I asked him if he'd felt it while he was handling it, he paused for a long time before answering. "It was cold by then," he said, "but the clothes were damp. I don't know what was inside that package. I know what I heard. I know what I felt pushed back against my thumb. And I know that somewhere on my route, someone mailed something that shouldn't have been breathing." This account was sent by a former paperboy from Savannah, Georgia. He delivered the morning news to a sprawling subdivision that backed up against a salt marsh. His last house stood at the end of a long gravel drive. isolated from the others by a thick stand of live oaks draped in Spanish moss. The house belonged to a man named Mr. Beecham. He was a retired professor or something, a widower who kept himself. He always left an envelope taped to the paper slot once a month with my tip inside. I never saw him. The porch light was always on. The drive was always empty. The paper was always collected by the time I came back the next day. On the morning of November 18th, I turned onto the drive and saw headlights. Mr. Beauchamp's car was parked in front of the house. The engine was running. The driver's door was open. I braked. The car was an old Buick, exhaust curling in the cold air. The interior light was on. No one inside. I looked toward the house. The porch light was off for the first time in 2 years. The front door stood wide open. I called out. The marsh answered with its nighttime hum. Frogs and crickets and a distant lap of tidal water. Nothing human. I should have left. I should have turned my bike around and called the police from the nearest payphone. But Mr. Beecham was my only tipper. I cared about him in the abstract way you care about someone who's never spoken to you, but always remembers to say thank you. I walked up the porch steps. The front door opened into a dark hallway. At the end of the hallway, a phone was ringing. Not a cell phone ring, a landline rotary dial ring. Steady and loud. It rang 6 times, then 7, then 8. No answer machine kicked in. I stepped inside. The hallway floor was hardwood with a long runner rug. My sneakers made no sound. The phone rang 9 times. 10. I reached the kitchen at the end of the hall. The phone was on the counter, its cord twisted in a knot. I picked up the receiver. Silence, then a dialed tone. The ringing had stopped the moment I touched it. The kitchen was clean, a bowl in the drying rack, a newspaper open to the crossword puzzle on the table. The date on the masthead was November 18th. I recognized my own throw pattern. I delivered that paper myself an hour ago. The crossword was half finished. The pen was still resting on the page. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, slow footsteps, crossing a room directly above my head. They moved toward the stairs, and I ran. I sprinted down the hallway, out the door, across the gravel, and I didn't stop pedaling until I was 3 blocks away. Gasping, my legs burning, I called the police from a gas station. They found Mr. Beecham in an upstairs bedroom, dead. He'd passed in his sleep. The coroner said, sometime the previous evening. The car keys were in his pocket. The front door had been locked, according to the first officer on the scene, who had to break it open because no one responded. But the door was open when I arrived. The car was running. The phone was ringing, and I heard footsteps. I heard them. I don't deliver papers anymore. I work in office now with fluorescent lights and 100 co-workers and doors that lock from the inside. But sometimes, late at night, when the building is empty and the phone rings on my desk for no reason, I don't answer it because I'm afraid of what I'll hear on the other end, or what won't be there at all. A USPS carrier from a suburban route outside Sacramento, California, submitted this account. She'd been on the job 8 years and thought she knew every inch of her territory. She was wrong. My route covered 3 zip codes in exactly 47 streets. I had them memorized. Spring Creek Drive ended at a key junction with Marigold Avenue. Beyond Marigold was a drainage ditch and an open field. At least, that's what the map said. One Tuesday in late January, I was running behind schedule. The sun sets early that time of year, and I was racing dusk to finish my deliveries. I turned onto Marigold and saw something I'd never noticed before. A street branching off to the left past a drainage ditch, a cul-de-sac. 6 houses, identical, arranged in a perfect semicircle. No street sign, no mailboxes, no numbers on the houses. I slowed the truck and checked my route map on the tablet. No street. I zoomed in, nothing but a blank patch of green between Marigold and the creek. I looked up. The houses were still there. New construction, maybe not yet added to the system. That happens sometimes. I decided to drive in and check for addresses. The pavement was fresh and smooth. No tire marks, no oil stains. The houses were all painted the same shade of beige, all with the same front door, dark brown, no windows, no peepholes, no porch lights. No landscaping, just bare mulch beds and empty driveways. The silence was thick and wrong, like a room with the soundproofing turned up too high. At the far end of the cul-de-sac, a figure waved at me. It was a man in a male carrier uniform. He stood next to a USPS truck identical to mine, parked in front of a last house. He raised his hand in the kind of wave you give someone you know. I didn't recognize him. I didn't recognize a truck either. The plate was obscured by mud, and the number on the side was scratched off. I didn't wave back. I put the truck in reverse and started backing out. The man lowered his hand. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me retreat, his face a pale smudge in the fading light. Just before I turned the bend back onto Marigold, I saw one of the house doors open. A figure stepped out onto the threshold. Then another door opened. Then another, all identical, all dark doorways with pale smudges inside them. I didn't stop. I flowered onto Marigold and drove straight back to the distribution center. I told my supervisor about the street. He pulled up the satellite view on his computer. There was nothing there, just a field, just a creek, no pavement, no houses, no cul-de-sac. He asked me if I was feeling okay. I told him I'd seen what I'd seen. The next day, I drove past that stretch of Marigold with the sun high overhead. No street, no curb cut, just a field of dry grass and a drainage ditch. I even got out and walked the area. Nothing under my feet, but packed dirt and weeds. The only thing I found was a single piece of fresh asphalt, about the size of a dinner plate, half buried in the mud. I kept it. It's on my desk at home. It reminds me that I'm not crazy. But the thing that keeps me up at night isn't the houses that vanished. It's the man in the uniform who waved at me. Because whoever he was, he knew me. And if I'd gotten out of my truck and walked toward him, I'm not sure I would have ever found my way back to Marigold Avenue. 11 people who went to work in the dark and came back with something they couldn't unsee. You can send your submissions through the website. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your porch lights on and your doors locked.